welcome back, everyone, to another exciting edition of Reality's Edge with Doc and Buddy. We're here today to entertain you with the latest science and UFOs and mystery of the paranormal and all the good fractal stuff in between because, hey, we know you love it, we love it, and that's what the show's all about. So, once again, thanks for all your excellent comments and questions and participation on the page below. I got to tell you, I live for your comments because it's so fun to interact with smart, intelligent, open-minded people. Don't you feel the same way, buddy? What a relief.
They're really challenging my beliefs and changing my beliefs. And I really feel like what I've always hoped and wanted to happen is we're all kind of learning together. You know, if you come out there and you're like, I'm the master of authority, you deny yourself the opportunity to learn. And this whole platform, you know, earnestly exploring the tangibles and even some of the intangibles of this dynamic field is so exciting with this particular group of people. I guess
so exciting.
I guess we all share so many different sensibilities, from wanting to know the science, from being skeptical ourselves, to being open-minded enough to explore alternative possibilities.
Yes.
Exciting. And we're on the brink of discovery right now. So many cool things.
Yeah, isn't this exciting, buddy? And a big thank you to all of you out there for participating. I just want to personally thank you for having an open mind, willing to listen to us, because I can tell you, having worked with Buddy now for a couple months and interacted with all of you, we're at the edge of something really big. And I'm not just saying that facetiously, like some sort of new age idea like 2000 is going to come or 2012. I'm talking about evidence. Evidence I'm reading daily. We're about to share some new evidence with you, just breaking stuff about.
And you know what?
Yeah.
To Doc, what's so cool about this being in this era and us being who we are, we're not observing this from the outside. We're participants. You know, a lot of people, it takes them a long time to get to the consciousness aspect and to get to the other aspects beyond that. And we are participants, you know, and so we're coming from a different perspective where, you know, the viewer can, you know, live through our experiences and, you know, our successes and failures and explorations, and, you know, we can all share stuff. It's so freaking thrilling. I wish I could do this, you know, I wish I didn't have to sleep and I could do this all night even.
Yeah, you guys are the best. That's what we want to say, because we couldn't do it without your participation, and, you know, otherwise we'd think we're crazy.
Right? And they're brilliant ideas from everyone.
Brilliant ideas. I love seeing this, buddy, all come together from the data, the evidence from all the military intel guys that have come forward, what I'm reading in Science Magazine on a weekly basis, and then our conversations and participation and with all of you. It's all coming together in this beautiful kind of fusion of evidence and data and ideas, and this doesn't happen very often. You could live in centuries where nobody wants to think about anything except what they've been told by their parents and their church and authorities, and it's all, look at this, we're coming together and saying, hey, that's not how it works. We're seeing something out there that doesn't fit what we were taught in high school. Now tell us what the F is going on, please, or we're going to figure it out for ourselves day by day, and that's what we're doing.
What an incredible opportunity. As someone who loves science and loves mysteries and loves this stuff, the potentiality of consciousness, to be here now where we're really getting real answers, and studies are coming in with just slight hints of this thing that all these different subjects are pointing towards. Everything from Buddhism to neurology to ET contact to quantum physics. Everything is pointing toward consciousness and observation, the observer, and the powers of the mind.
Interaction.
Something underneath.
Yes. Something else is going on than we were told about formally.
Yes, there's a new reality.
Yeah. We're almost at Reality's Edge. So it's a good name for a show.
I like that.
I like that. Hey.
Oh, anyway.
Yeah. So
you told me some info that blew my mind.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying you told me some info that blew my mind yesterday. I didn't know about.
So, you know, there was a tweet from our friend Danny Silva, and it had to do with a new interview by Commander retired David Fravor from the Black Aces, from the Tic Tac incident, from the Nimitz, on this podcast called Fighter Podcast. This is a podcast for fighter pilots, and the the interviewer interviews other fighter pilots. He's a former Navy fighter pilot on the Nimitz. He was there when it happened, but he didn't he didn't see anything that day. They obviously didn't tell everybody. He interviewed David Fravor a few days ago.
Wow.
And new information came out. We hadn't heard the whole story.
Wow.
I love listening to David Sex Fravor. And by the way, we found out how he got his call sign. He said they wouldn't let him do that anymore. It's not politically correct, but obviously his last name Fravor rhymes with favor. So you can kind of
sexual favor.
And he said they wouldn't let him do that anymore. That was back then, and it's become more politically correct, and people would complain.
Why didn't he? I don't believe that. He could have been nacho flavor. So, but I remember giving you that inside information about him being called Sex before anybody on the internet.
You did.
I'm kidding. Well, not the internet. I guess YouTube.
You gave us the info of the other pilot, another female pilot, and it was very controversial at the time, but I imagine it still is. I haven't repeated her name very much. There's a part of me, honestly, that doesn't feel comfortable doing this with someone who hasn't voluntarily come forward. On the other hand, this is someone who worked for the U.S. government in planes. It's a public incident. I mean, so I can go both ways, but we learned about more people from him in this podcast. And basically what he told us was that there was another type of object seen around the exercises on the East Coast in 2015 when they had more Tic Tac sighted. He described a small sphere with a square inside. I am not making this up. This is Dave Fravor telling you a second type of UFO in the Tic Tac incident. A very small object that he said went down the wingtip of the other F-18, only 100 feet away.
Wow. This is stunning. I want to really quickly, and then I promise I'll come right back. Because you brought up the bringing up the pilot's name, I just wanted to address it really quickly. Because I was in a lose-lose situation. I had been given the documents, and I'm still suffering the decision, suffering the effects of the decision. I was in a lose-lose situation, and for me, not just because of the reasons you mentioned did I release it. If it was just those reasons, I wouldn't have mentioned it, because there's a lot of people involved in this research and in this field and in incidents. But this is, as of now, that case is a historic, the best evidence case in history. She's the best witness from history. She was considered, at the time, especially the best witness. And I was criticized on both sides, saying that I am just as bad as the government for suppressing information. And then on the other side, and of course I didn't release any of her personal information. There were scores of other people in the document. I didn't release any other pages, any other one else's information, all that stuff. And to this day, I just ask people who are still upset with me to grant me my human frailty. And if you believe I was wrong, which I believe I could be, but I don't completely believe right now, but please grant me my human frailty and forgive me if you believe I stepped too far, but know that my intentions are earnest to do the right thing and to rise to the responsibility of the occasion. And if I screwed up, grant me my human failure. But regardless, I think it was the right thing to do because it was historical.
Oh, okay.
This incident kind of even goes more to the amazingness and the importance of this case and how important this Nimitz incident is and these series of incidents.
Well, I just want to say something about that, buddy, because you were in a very tough position there. It's not of your making. This is what Fravor said. Nobody wanted to talk about it. He didn't want to talk about it until Lou Elizondo came up to New Hampshire, where Fravor lives, and said, Dave, you got to do this for us. You're the most credible witness we have. And Dave initially said, I don't want to do it. I don't want the publicity.
Sure.
Because we're all trained to want a comfortable, nice life where we have our steady salary benefits, where we have from our job. We don't want anything interfering with that, according to everyone I've talked to who's been in the military.
Yeah, no one wants to be considered a loon.
No, and no one wants to be considered a loon. That's what Fravor said. I don't like having the reporters follow me around to my coffee shop when my wife and I are having coffee on Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. At the same time, sometimes history calls on you to stand up and play a bigger role. And at the time, it won't be popular. I don't even think George Washington was popular with 80% of the U.S. population. Well, it wasn't the U.S. back then, in the colonies. The vast majority of colonists wanted to stay with Britain. Okay, nobody ever likes the people at the time that make the tough decisions and have to stand up and do something different. But history requires you to do this, or nothing would ever change, folks. We would still be just believing in Aristotelian physics, where everything just stays the same, everything's circular, and we don't even need to talk about it because it's always the same. How boring. So sometimes you have to do the tough thing. And Dave did that. Luis Elizondo convinced him. And he came forward and
kudos. I mean, a round of applause to that guy for doing that.
Oh, man, what a hero. I mean, and he's still talking about it, though. It's kind of crickets now on this incident. And it's partly crickets because other people who saw it were told at least a few hundred on the Princeton and the Nimitz and the other ships that were in the radar, CIC control, Intel knew about this. None of those people want to talk about it because of their careers. Sure. The pilot you talked about. So you were in a very tough position there, buddy, because if you don't reveal the information that's been leaked to you by someone from the inside, then you're holding it back. At the other side, you come forward. People say, well, she deserves her privacy. And I'm like in a superposition about it. I can go this way. So listen, it's not your fault. It's a very tough position. But if we don't take risks like this, how are we going to move forward on this topic? Fravor came forward. He gave this interview. And let me add one more thing that he added in, which was very important for me. The Mexican military sightings of those objects on the infrared a few years earlier. Do you remember those from around 2010?
Oh, yeah. That looked like the oil platforms.
And people said, the debunkers said, those are oil platforms. Guess what Fravor said?
They were not oil platforms.
No, you have a top F-18 pilot saying those were in the exact position that we saw them. They were there for 2 weeks. By the time there was a naval exercise going on with Marines. The Marines were going to play the bad guy. Fravor and his team were playing the good guys. They were supposed to intercept the Marines. These objects had been seen for 2 weeks. We know this. And they said, okay, Dave, what's your loadout? That's how he heard about it. He's up in the air going to get the red team, the comrade red team, the Soviet team. And they say, Dave, what's your loadout? And I was like, what? He said, they have an infrared seeker, but there's no payload because it's a practice mission. And he said, it's an infrared seeker. And
you know what this keeps reminding me of? We keep having these incidents where the military will be doing an exercise, like we've talked about in the previous episodes. A lot of exercises are getting UFO encounters, but when they sight them, it's not a one-time occurrence of one craft. It's an occurrence of a squadron, and they see this squadron and groups of them over a period of time. So that just tells you how much they master us in terms of technology, that we can be desperately trying to find them, know they're even there and probably coming back, and we still can't track them or nail it down, Amazing.
Penetration of solid surfaces, disassembly of sensors.
This is major stuff.
Space-time anomalies to witnesses.
And this goes back into what we had, that incredibly fascinating episode about, the fractal nature of UFOs, that they'd be the larger motherships and the smaller medium escort ships and the smaller sample ships, and that they go all the way down to, and we even had the episode where we were talking about those small circular ones that have some lines in it. You know what? I'm going to go back and look at those videos to see if those small balls with those linear lines in it match his description. I don't know if you remember the video of that one flying between two people on the beach. And there's several others that I've captured, and you put them all together, they look very like they're the same class of object, the same exact manufacturer, everything.
Buddy, first of all, big shout out to Dave Fravor for doing a second interview about this. We really appreciate you. From the bottom of my heart, someone who could come forward and still say to this day, the interviewer asked him again, buddy, he said, I don't believe those are from this world. If we had those, this is 15 years ago, that technology would have slowly leaked out of the black budget programs. The black budget programs do serve a purpose. In someone's mind, they could become technology eventually. He said, we haven't seen anything remotely like that.
And he's one of the very, very top guys in the air.
He's the top guy if he says that, and Elizondo and Chris Mellon, who ran the special access programs, well, he didn't run them. He was managing them and to do with the Senate Intelligence Committee. You know what he did in the department. If those guys say it's not our stuff, I don't think. And Fravor said it's not. The way it moves, he said, it doesn't displace air. You know, the way our stuff would at that speed. You would have sonic booms and.
We know that they're unquestionably, from the research papers that they handed out to get more information on, that they are messing with the space-time metric. They can control space-time.
Which is what Hal Puthoff called it, space-time metric engineering. And, Buddy, you're the one that pointed out to me quite a while ago that this had a fractal sort of quality to it. And ding, since this is what my PhD was about fractals, I thought, hey, there's something interesting here. So now we're getting some evidence, Buddy, that you were right. There are bigger ones which apparently release smaller ones. And I'm wondering, have any of you out there seen these small spheres? Because these could be around all over the place. And you can see now why the government's been a little reluctant to release this information. How about if we just come tell you, Buddy, and you and everyone, they're spheres like there they are. That's them. They're all over. We can't do anything about it. Just go about your business. Yes,
we did some projections, and this is very amateur projections on my part because I'm not a mathematician, but I can just do some basic mathematics. And if you have a large mothership, let's say 375 feet only, which is the size of a hangar at Area 51. So we know we have a giant craft there. It's most likely that stealth blimp they've been talking about, but maybe not. And you break this down, you end up at the end with so many craft. It is ridiculous. We can send you this information if you want, or any of these drawings if they're fun for you.
That's an excellent illustration of what it apparently really looks like, Buddy. The mother craft, the smaller Tic Tacs, the triangle.
And what's really fascinating to me about the smaller craft is we could perform experiments to find out if these craft are here. But first, before we go into it, here's the premise. The premise is, as you get closer to the surface of the Earth, the size of these craft decrease. As you get closer to the surface of the Earth, the size of the craft decreases, but the numbers of those craft increase. And simultaneously, as you get closer to the surface of the Earth, the need and the requirement to maintain constant invisibility obviously would increase because you're closer and closer to interacting with the biological species that you're hypothetically studying or, doing something with. So theoretically, the smaller they become, the more invisible they would be. On average. And that, I'm going to bring up that picture that I found of those circular craft and how I put a few of the different incidents together and the craft look, just stunningly similar side by side.
Can you hold that picture?
I'll bring it up in just a second. And if there are ones that are 3 feet, and the U.S. military, remember I showed you that tiny little mosquito drone that the Air Force is working on?
I remember that one. Yeah.
Imagine how small of drones they could be creating. And perhaps these tiny drones could be a very practical, earthly solution to how they turn off machinery, how they disassemble equipment, how they get into nuclear facilities. For example, here's the 2 different craft of these spinning ones that were next to each other. There's flying between them on the beach. And you could imagine that these potentially could have, logically, you would think that any craft would have some backup support craft of some kind. And logically, they would be smaller. And we have fighter jets that have like a cluster bomb munition that falls out. And that cluster bomb munition releases a bunch of drones, a little drone fleet.
Yes. Yeah.
It would be very logical to assume that those could be around us in levels, in places, in ways. And I would think that the reason why we catch the ones in the air more likely is because they're captured on infrared systems. FLIR and all that stuff. And on the ground, we have much less FLIR systems. But I'm suspicious if we had infrared floodlights and ultraviolet floodlights at different locations and places, we might capture some hints of their existence. But it's frightening, honestly, Doc, how small they could go and how... if you accept the premise that extraterrestrials are here, you have to accept logically the realistic possibility that very small ones could be closer to us than we have suspected.
Yes, and you're making me think now to give credit to Richard Dolan about his book After Disclosure, where one of the scenarios in there was that the reason we wouldn't be told about this is that people would be afraid to go outside. It was just one of many reasons that he and his co-author, I think it was Bryce Zabel, said that people would be afraid. So now I'm getting that feeling if Trump comes out and tweets tomorrow, guys, by the way, forget the wall for the moment. I have evidence that there are little objects that won't be stopped by the wall.
Well, if he gets indicted, he'll probably drop the UFO bomb on us, just to get a distraction, a good, solid distraction.
It's coming. This is a whole nother topic, but I feel that this potential is getting higher every day for him to become the UFO president, to distract us from the government shutdown, the wall,
the foibles. I think you're completely right.
And
you have to, if you love disclosure, you have to accept the possibility that his wild card nature could provide us just the thing we've been looking for at the right time.
He went against his entire military and said, we're pulling out of Syria, which personally I agree with. I don't think we should have our troops scattered all over the planet, making everyone pissed off at us if it really doesn't serve our interest, when other countries can handle it more effectively than we can. It doesn't seem to be effective. And it's another subject. But if you could have someone that could go against the entire military and intelligence establishment in D.C., and he says, I don't care what you guys think, I'm the president, we're withdrawing. He has the power to do that.
Yeah.
He could, as I've said to people, he could say, I don't care what the military industrial black budget government thinks. I'm the commander in chief. If I want the UFO programs to be public, I'm the commander in chief. What are you guys going to do about it? Right?
It's a much better wag the dog option than going to war, which has been a strategy of the past. When other presidents have been under pressure, they go to war in order to divert attention. This would be a great
Very good point, buddy. Very good point. We don't need to have the Werner von Braun, Carol Rosin scenario, right? Where that's good. And you could do it peacefully, and it could just serve a political purpose. I think this is possible, whether you like him or not. He could be the guy that just says, I don't care.
When I see all the potential outcomes and where we are in modern society now, we're far away from the War of the Worlds era. We're far away from the age when the Brookings Institute and the social psychology is far away from that age. And I think that we need disclosure right now. Stephen Hawking, who was, he wasn't stupid, said that humanity has about 100 years on this planet. He said 100 years, and it could be dramatically less. And, I've been talking about for a long time, at the beginning of my channel, convergence theory, which is about as time passes, all the different catastrophic things that could destroy life on Earth, or at least humanity, increase dramatically as time progresses. And there comes a point where, statistically, if you're not preparing for that possibility, you're being really, nearsighted. And, the dinosaurs didn't have an ability to look far into the future and create technology to save themselves.
So what you're suggesting, buddy, let's be honest what you're suggesting. That scenario that you're talking about, which scientists say is most likely, no species lasts forever. We've been around for 100,000 years. How much time do we have left? I've seen the estimates, a couple hundred, maybe 500, max 1,000. Eventually the sun explodes in a couple billion years, but way before that, species come and go. However, you're raising another point. Could these entities that are around, this presence that we don't know what or who it is, could it alter the show so that that fate doesn't await us and that we keep going?
I think, that my whole philosophy about their presence, everyone who knows me knows the nature of it, is that they know what's going to happen. They see the obvious things. But like me, if I was in their situation, I wouldn't try to dramatically change the society. I would save all first. My first priority would be to preserve the valuable, priceless biological data and other data that comes from the biosphere. Consciousness data from all the animals, all the biological data, everything. And then I would let that species, intelligent species, know. I'd give them hints. I would make it be subtle, and I would put it in their control. Like my child, I'm going to let my child make their own important mistakes. I'm not going to go into their room and clean up their room for them. You know, they have to clean up their own room to get their responsibility to get a car, to drive around the universe, their universe as a kid. And us is the same thing. I don't know if we may get the car anyway, because I think the aliens, to be frank, they're not coming down here and teaching us music. They come down here and teach us how to build spacecraft. Specifically, throughout history, they have represented near future technology, and they inspire us to say, oh, we could do blimps. Oh, we could do rockets. Oh, we can do triangles. Oh, we can do stealth. Then they're teaching the experiencers how to fly the craft, how to fly multiple craft with your mind, all this stuff. Then they're crashing a craft to teach us how to fly. It seems obvious to me when you put all these pieces together, they know the one thing that they decided to teach us, the one thing out of all the things in the universe they could teach us, is how to get the fuck off this planet. And that's teaching us how to build a craft. And maybe they realize that little starting piece, that is all they need to have a future. So they'll give us a little bit of, no one's looking around the universe. We're going to break the prime directive. Like in that Star Trek movie when they broke the prime directive and helped that planet anyway. Whatever. I forget that. It was one of the more latest ones where they created a cargo cult even at the end. Do you remember that episode where they did something to the volcano and fixed the volcano or something like that? But anyway, that's my wild.
Well, see, the thing is, Buddy, we're taking a list of names of who wants to be on the spaceship with Doc and Buddy.
We're on that sucker. You know it.
On the list now to reserve a space.
We're on that sucker. The first one.
No, it's a very interesting scenario, and I think you can all see the scope of what we're talking about here. We all love talking about these subjects, but let's say this particular scenario that, Buddy, we're painting for you here is that, it's a type of interaction. Have any of us ever considered what it would be like to fly around in these craft with who's ever on there and
oh my gosh,
outside the atmosphere and come back? And, this is what the potential we're talking about here. And it's such a huge change from being gravity bound to the planet. Most of us don't think about lifting off very often, except when we go on a plane. We have to pay money to do it, and we don't do it, for most of us, every day. But we get about 5 miles up in the atmosphere and we come back down. And these days you don't even see too much. The windows have gotten so small. But let's say that becomes a possibility of people being able to go somewhere else. I mean, it's the consequences are so big. The implications here are so, and again, you could see why the existing establishment, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or more like me, you just think it's kind of built into the culture of the institutions. Nobody wants us talking like this, because immediately you're out of the consumer cycle, you're out of the control system. All these little things that kind of get something from us would lose. It would go to another intelligence, another entity, another collective, and it's not just others. I mean, right now, Buddy, we're creating alternative systems to interact with each other, cryptocurrencies, all this. It's already happening on its own, and it's a sea change. And I think that's what the implications are.
I think it is. And you know what? Leaving the planet has many implications. To me, the biggest ones, of course, are all the ethical and moral considerations. The second you leave your planet, a whole new set of moral and ethical implications present themselves. How you must operate in that environment, what happens if this happens, what happens if that happens. You're dealing with a whole new, very, very serious set of ethics. Before we found the New World, when Europeans were pursuing the oceans, it was a very dangerous time. There were very special rules and laws for seas and on these ships and under these dangerous conditions. And as humanity becomes more and more isolated throughout space, there's going to be some incredible and wonderful challenges and weird situations that happen. When you isolate humans and you give a few select power, strange thing happened. How many times have you heard episodes of a ship wrecking and the crew having all these, Lord of the Flies kind of scenarios over time?
Oh, no. True. I mean, you could run into Johnny Depp out there, and if you were in the Caribbean with his pirate ship.
Right.
What would you do? What would you do? I mean, do you have that scenario worked out if you encounter a pirate ship and a ghost ship? No, it's true, buddy. It's a legal, ethical frameworks. And we often rely on governments to help us interpret this, but our own federal government, as of this recording, can't even get its act together to fund itself. People at this moment are
Wonderful point.
calling in sick who work at TSA and things like this. It's kind of slowly falling apart even right now as we speak. And so in the long run, what replaces that? There are other systems coming into place. Again, the cryptocurrency, but that's not ethically based. That's a transactional system.
No, I think our blessing could be happening right under our noses. You know, for me, I've always had this big fear that as technology gets more powerful, fewer and fewer people can do greater and greater damage with less and less. You know,
That's right.
An army to take out a city now takes one person with a suitcase nuke. And as all these technological and ethical dilemmas present themselves, the one thing that shines through to me that offers hope is transparency.
Yes. No.
And transparency, especially in combination with technology, could be the very things that offer us hope. You know, this episode kind of has a theme of technology and its implications for society. And, you know, you and I focus a lot on remote viewing and the powers of consciousness and psi, because consciousness and psi taps into something real. It's a real thing in the universe. And if that can happen, it can be represented technologically. Even in a weird way, like nowadays we have remote viewing, but it's technological based. You can see around the world through web cameras, live, see any places. You can do clairaudience and talk to someone around the world like only the monks could talk about 2,000 years ago with their powers of meditation in their cities, using their chitta and connecting to the Shiva instead of connecting to the internet. And they could talk to each other, monks thousands of miles away. The ability to do all sorts of things. We're recreating these psychic abilities technologically. We're returning to the ages of magic almost.
No, it's funny. You know, you're raising some really good points here. I mean, I want to thank you for bringing that up, transparency and the implications, because for hundreds of years we've been going towards centralization, thousands of years, and that led to the creation of bureaucracies, which led to creation of boredom and control, and kind of these efficiency standards, and it became very uncomfortable for people to live around these faceless bureaucracies. I mean, think of Kafka and
Great point.
sociology in my field, Max Weber, who wrote about the iron cage. And now what we see, no question about it, is a reversal, going back the other direction towards smaller scale systems that are self-regulating, that don't need an overarching structure apart from nature to be able to function well and satisfy everyone's needs without excessive layers above of bureaucracy, which takes skin out of the game and create these terrible inefficiencies. And, you know, just what we see was happening with the federal government right now, that it can't agree how to even pay for itself. And crucial security positions like at airports are going unstaffed. I mean, it creates danger. But these smaller scale systems don't have that, because if one little part fails here, the other parts take over. And it leads me to wonder whether these little spheres with the square inside that Dave Fravor talked about, maybe they're the controllers and the big motherships are just listening to feedback from all the little spheres. In other words, we see the big triangle as this big authority thing, but maybe if we went in and be kind of almost like, no, guys, we're just listening to the little spheres. We take our orders from the spheres.
Or maybe we have that concept completely wrong. Maybe they share one unifying intelligence amongst all of them, and no one's a leader.
And no one's in charge the way it should be. You know,
they have a cloud function.
Yeah, I mean, it's going this way anyway in our own society, to take away middle levels of management and just replace it with lots of little interactions or direct contact. Look at this show. We don't even need a network to come to all of you. We just, you know, so, well, we do. I mean, we're using this, you know, YouTube, Google, but you get the idea. We don't need anyone's permission. And so it's a pretty big change, but it's necessary, because I don't think the existing system, the way we have it with these large institutions, they can't adapt strongly enough. Look at what happened in 2008, 2009 with the credit collapse. Some of the banks had to be bailed out, or the whole economy could have ceased to function because of the toxic interactions between each of them, you know, the whole thing, the way they insured each other. Now, little systems, your little bank on the corner, your little credit union, that would never happen with thousands and thousands of little banks, because if one or two fail or a bunch fail here, the others could absorb it, and it would be seamless. It would almost be perfect, because the other neighborhood, you can see what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you know, and it makes me think, what are the sociological implications of, as technology advances really quickly, you know, companies have to be flexible and move with the time of the tide quickly, or they can quickly be outdated. If you're still focusing on 8 tracks, you're not going to make money in the digital age. You know what I mean? And it makes me feel like, wow, the challenges as economic entities grow larger and larger is not to, you know, is to diversify, you know. But now I'm getting into some weird
Hey,
financial
I
model.
like my 8 tracks, man. I got my John Travolta Saturday night.
I got my John Denver 8 track still, brother.
Anyway, go ahead.
So, you know, I think, you know, technology, although it's our greatest, you know, one of our greatest dangers, is also could be our savior. And also we could ultimately, it seems very logical that a biological entity that gets intelligence after a certain period of time could logically make a decision to go non-biological in order to acquire a lot new abilities and immortality and all sorts of other things. So we could even be dealing with an advanced civilization that's post-biological.
Very possible. And it kind of brings me to what you and I have been talking about recently, this idea of artificial intelligence, quantum computers, leading to a new type of intelligence. I mean, expound on that a little bit. You've been talking about this, the kind of convergence of technology and biology, not in the robot-like way that we got from sci-fi movies where we all become more like robots, but kind of the opposite, where consciousness spreads to machines.
I was working on, ironically enough, a very interesting program with a company that works for, you know, I'll just say it, DARPA. I can't get in trouble for it. And we had started working on a project and an idea that I had. I have a comedy background, a comedian background, and someone said, you can never teach someone how to be funny. And I was like, wow, of course you can. You can teach someone the comedy formulas. Comedy is like math. But most people consider comedy to be such a purely human function, a purely human function. And if you could teach a computer how to be funny, that would be one of the last remaining things to creating lifelike creatures and lifelike artificial intelligences. And for me, being a comedian, I know how to make something funny. And so I created these flow charts. And I showed these flow charts to a friend of mine who's a programmer. Is like, if you can put it in flow charts, you can program it. And so we created a machine, and the idea that the machine is, we discovered that comedy is, in terms of a sociological function, and you will appreciate this, comedy is non-linear problem solving. It basically looks at classic social problems and comes at it from a different perspective and solves the problem from an untraditional, unexpected way. And that is a very powerful type of thinking. Nonlinear problem solving is a very powerful form of thinking that we consider the strict bastion of humanity. You know, and other animals really don't have this. Maybe monkeys do, maybe porpoises, but this creative problem, you know, they've shown that crows can do it, and monkeys can make tools, and porpoises and raccoons. But so anyway, we thought that the value of teaching a computer nonlinear problem solving to do comedy would be very easy with these formulas. And you have to have the right inputs and outputs and processes in order to come up with this nonlinear thing. But with the flowcharts, it was completely possible. And then we quickly realized that this would have applications for the military to process a bunch of different military strategies for any potential innovative, revolutionary ideas that perhaps weren't unconventional ideas that were never thought of before, like flying 11, or flying, 6 planes into the biggest buildings or things like that. And it took a very short period of time till we realized that this computer, if we really taught it nonlinear problem solving, would be smarter than the average bear, because it would have options at its disposal that regular linear problem solving computer would never have. And it would also have implications for the financial market. And in fact, my partners in that project, and we spent a lot of time and effort and have a demo and everything, and we're working with USC, their computer division there, and they're one of the top providers for DARPA. And a friend of mine was one of the guys who at the head of the program who signs contracts to move forward on a project or not. And we made a decision as a group not to do the project. We bailed out at the last minute. I had this entire package, and at my brokest times recently, I knew that I could get some money if we relaunched that project. And I talked about it with my buddy, and thank God my buddy is such a good moral human being. He's like, we can make money other ways, bro. Let's just, but we're still keeping the option open to do a funny app, like a comedy app that'll teach you, that'll create jokes, in real individual jokes each time, and learn. But it's a big thing. But you know what, nonlinear problem solving in different forms. People say, oh, it takes quantum computing to have real consciousness. Forget it. You're valuing consciousness too high. You think it's too unique. Look around you. Look at all the other animals that do amazing things. These are programs. A human being operates on programming. Comedy operates on programming. Even the things we consider the most human, like poetry and dance, those are mathematical, programmable, deterministic qualities.
We need to get Max Tegmark on this show because he's a proponent of this idea that everything is, but by the way, his other book is about multiverses, the 4 different types of multiverses, which we can talk about, and why he thinks that leads to everything just being math. But buddy, you're the first person ever to connect comedy and warfare together in the same sentence. But anyway, please go ahead. What were you going to say about Max Tegmark and multiverses?
Max is a believer ultimately that math is the ultimate source, and math is the ultimate source of the universe. Where you and I are on the other side of the fence. There, I'm kind of in the middle. Maybe I'm that it's a mix of everything. A tapestry.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, having been a meditator for about 40 years now, that I think of consciousness as the actual primary stuff of the universe, and everything is an epiphenomena of consciousness. But I can't prove that. It's just an idea.
But you know. When you
everything
think about
is conscious. How about if everything is conscious, not just humans? It's so anthropocentric. You know, people talk about we've got consciousness and it collapses quantum waves. And no, I mean, yes and no. Quantum, everything is conscious. How about that consciousness pervades the whole thing? It's not the way science looks at it right now. And I can't fault science for doing this, given that we've grown up with these senses. But you think it comes out of matter. But how about it's the other way around?
Wonderful, wonderful notion. You know, what if a consciousness is just the ability to sense and interact with things around you, and particles can sense and interact things around you.
Oh, yeah.
But also think about this. A universe without consciousness is meaningless. It's completely meaningless. But also beyond that, we've found, you know, science, at least on some level, is touching that mystery about how interactive consciousness is with matter. You know, the dual slit experiment is saying some observational consciousness interaction is going on. Wow, we grabbed a tiger by the tail with this episode.
We're too many topics now. We could go in like a superposition of directions right now from this.
I mean, this technology subject leads us so many different directions with this topic.
Okay, so let me just suggest one possibility from this. Is we will talk about this in future episodes. It's something I've been thinking a lot about the past week. I tweeted it to you about 10 days ago, this idea that across all these systems, there's symmetry principles and conservation. Emmy Noether's idea of conservation and symmetry, you know, she corrected Einstein because he had not taken into account some. So this is a very fundamental principle. Symmetry being, I disturb this, then this moves, and you can't really change anything without something. You can't change anything here without something else changing there. And increasingly, to me, I see this with fractal dimensions across systems.
Oh, yeah.
So I am wondering, and I'm just putting this out there, I can't prove it, but I want all of you to think about this. Is it possible that the people working now to develop quantum computing will come across some new principles of consciousness that even they haven't foreseen ahead of time? That might even scare the dickens out of them, because it might show that there's a larger, higher intelligence that manages, I don't quite know how to say it, regulates, none of those are quite the right word, but you know, it's going to oversees all the multiverses, all the possibilities, superpositions, whatever you want to call it, whatever your point of view is on. There's some sort of a higher intelligence. I'm not saying it's God or anything like this, but a regulating principle that has to preserve the symmetries across all the different branches in any
that seems so logical, Doc.
And if they come across it, what are they going to do, buddy? I mean, because this is not part of the Google plan for quantum supremacy.
What if they
encounter a higher mind?
What if humanity can accept it? What if humanity looks at it in bits and pieces and swallows it, not all as one meal, but bits and pieces, that there is, you know, we accept the fact that waves go through the air and we don't see them and connect to our TV and connect to our phone. We accept that the wind is something we can't quite, you know, put in a jar. I think that science and technology is knocking at the door, especially when we get to the really small subatomic realms where virtual particles start leaping in and out of nothingness. I think we're getting really close to the answers in there. If we can determine why a virtual particle appears at a certain location as opposed to another location, when it does, we'll have a greater understanding of the substructure just underneath that, because we don't understand why a specific virtual particle will appear here or appear there, and why this one has a different function afterwards than this one. And maybe I'm just hoping that we can get tangible evidence. Doc, I want, and I'm working on this research project, and you will be too, and we're blessed enough to be in connection. I hope this whole project continues to move forward to get some metrical scientific data on this phenomena. And this, this episode is really keep coming around this circle about getting scientific data. And oh darn.
Well, folks, I'm afraid to say I was warned by Buddy this could happen. We're right at the height of this episode here and going over some great stuff. I think Buddy's battery just died. He told me this could happen, and it looks like it really did. I have a text here from good old Comrade Bedinsky. He tells us he's really sorry that his battery died, and he will be with you in a future episode. So, Buddy, wherever you are, if you can hear us, we are interested in your project. I just have to say one response to that, and I guess you'll have to see it on the recording, Buddy, is that, that maybe all of these phenomena we talk about at Reality's Edge here, the Doc and Buddy show, these are all connected to some higher order principles of consciousness, intelligence, or however you want to think about it, but some sort of larger overarching symmetry, principles that relate to all these wonderful subjects we talk about, crop circles and remote viewing and UFOs, and consciousness and all. And that the farther we go with technology, I think this is what Buddy was suggesting before we lost him because of a technological issue, is that we will come across these same principles. I've wondered for so many decades now how RV, remote viewing, resonant viewing, virtual viewing, whatever you'd like to call it, viewing, how it works to connect everything. And you would have to imagine at some point technologically you'd come across the same sort of principle in general, whether it be through quantum computing or whatever sort of apparatus that shows that you're dealing with some sort of non-local interaction, non-local communication. Remember, none of this is technically allowed by traditional quantum mechanics, but we have the data for it. So how does it really work? Well, it's been another exciting episode of Reality's Edge, the Doc and Buddy show. I think we have a lot of things to talk about in future episodes. And as usual, folks, please put your comments below, hit the subscribe button. We love having you here. We're looking forward to getting Buddy back when he's recharged his battery. When he's recharged his battery. And in any case, thanks again for joining us at Reality's Edge, the Doc and Buddy show. We'll be with you in another exciting episode soon. And we'll talk to you again. Take care for now, and bye.